Hey there, amazing friends. I warmly invite you to join me on this exciting journey by subscribing to my channel, liking, commenting, and sharing my videos. Every like, comment, and share brings us closer together and fuels my passion to create more great content. Your support truly makes all the difference. Thank you for being the heart of this community. John Wayne Gacy, USA, the nightmare behind the clown mask, the chilling fate of 33 victims. It is said that evil often wears a familiar face, and in the case of John Wayne Gacy, that face was one of unsettling charm, hidden beneath a painted smile. In a quiet suburb of Chicago during the 1970s, a man who seemed to embody community spirit and geniality was, in truth, a predator whose crimes would forever stain the pages of American history. Gacy's dual existence, publicly a respected businessman and volunteer performer known as Pogo the Clown, and privately a calculating killer, embodies one of the darkest chapters in the annals of crime. His ability to manipulate, to hide behind a facade of humor and helpfulness, made his eventual revelation all the more horrifying. The following narrative seeks to unravel the disturbing life of John Wayne Gacy and the chilling fate of 33 victims whose lives were snuffed out by a man whose true nature was concealed behind the guise of a clown mask. Born in 1942 in Chicago, Gacy's early life was marred by instability and abuse, a foundation upon which his later monstrous tendencies would be built. As he grew older, his charm and affability allowed him to gain the trust of neighbors and coworkers. He became actively involved in local community events, often entertaining at children's parties as Pogo the Clown. To the casual observer, Gacy was the epitome of Midwestern decency. His polished image, his engaging personality, and his willingness to help in community fundraisers all contributed to a persona that belied his inner darkness. Yet beneath the smiling exterior, something sinister was brewing, a compulsive need to control, to dominate, and ultimately to take lives in the most calculating and brutal ways. The turning point in the Gacy saga came in the early 1970s when missing person reports began to trickle in from the Chicago area. Young men, many of whom had been lured by the promise of work or companionship, began to vanish without a trace. Initially, police regarded the cases as isolated incidents of runaways or petty crimes, but as the numbers grew, a pattern emerged that was impossible to ignore. Investigators soon discovered that these disappearances were connected to Gacy, whose charm had allowed him to draw his victims into his carefully constructed lair, a seemingly ordinary home in which the unimaginable horrors would unfold. Within the walls of his residence, behind closed doors, and hidden from the public eye, Gacy orchestrated a grim series of events that led to the murder of 33 young men and boys. He used promises of employment, friendship, and even simply the hope of a safe haven to lure his victims, exploiting their trust and vulnerability. Once inside his house, the true nature of Gacy's intentions became terrifyingly clear. Evidence later recovered in his home, mementos, personal belongings, and gruesome paraphernalia, painted a portrait of a man who was methodical in his approach, cold in his execution, and disturbingly proud of his ability to keep his double life hidden for so long. The duality of Gacy's existence is perhaps his most chilling aspect. In public, he was a fixture in local parades, a charitable figure who entertained children with balloon animals and clown antics. He was the kind of neighbor who would lend you a tool without hesitation, someone you might invite over for a friendly chat over the fence. Yet, behind that facade, he meticulously planned the abductions and murders that would terrorize the community. His victims were often young men from vulnerable backgrounds, many of whom had few people to turn to. Gacy exploited this, drawing them into his orbit with a disarming combination of kindness and intimidation, and then subjecting them to unspeakable acts that he later disposed of with a cold, calculated efficiency. The brutality of his crimes, each one executed with a precision that suggested a chilling detachment from humanity, shattered the illusion of normalcy that had long surrounded him. As the investigation into the disappearances gathered pace, the authorities began to piece together a mosaic of evidence that pointed inexorably toward Gacy. Neighbors reported odd behavior, a man who rarely left his house, who kept his yard unnaturally tidy, who seemed to take a particular interest in the comings and goings of young men from the neighborhood. Under increasing scrutiny, Gacy's polite smile began to crack, revealing fleeting moments of a darker, more menacing expression. Yet it was only after a routine search of his property that the full horror was unveiled. Hidden behind a false wall in his basement were the remains of many of his victims, buried hastily, concealed from prying eyes, and meticulously arranged as if to mock the very idea of justice. The grisly discovery sent shockwaves through the nation, transforming Gacy from a seemingly ordinary man into a symbol of unchecked evil. The trial of John Wayne Gacy was a spectacle that riveted the nation. Courtrooms became stages where the duality of his persona was laid bare for all to see. Prosecutors detailed the evidence with a clinical detachment that was both fascinating and repulsive, while defense attorneys attempted to portray him as a troubled soul driven by circumstances beyond his control. The testimonies of survivors and witnesses, though fragmented by trauma, painted a picture of a predator whose ability to compartmentalize his public and private lives was nothing short of monstrous. Gacy's own demeanor during the trial was unnervingly calm, his eyes betraying little emotion as he listened to the accounts of pain and loss. In a final act that sealed his fate, he was convicted and sentenced to death, a grim end to a life steeped in unimaginable horror. Yet even as Gacy's execution brought an end to his personal reign of terror, the legacy of his crimes continues to haunt the collective consciousness. Families of the victims, still grappling with the loss of sons, brothers, and friends, find that no amount of legal closure can mend the deep emotional scars left by such unthinkable acts. The community, once shattered by fear, continues to struggle with the shadow of that dark chapter. Documentaries, books, and endless discussions seek to understand how such a creature could walk among us, disguised as an everyday citizen. Psychologists and criminologists study his methods, trying to unravel the factors that allowed him to slip so seamlessly into society and commit acts that defy comprehension. His case remains a chilling reminder that evil does not always announce itself with fanfare. It can hide behind a kind smile, a well-tailored suit, or even a painted clown persona. In the aftermath, the story of John Wayne Gacy has morphed into a modern myth, a cautionary tale about the perils of misplaced trust and the fragility of our assumptions about normalcy. It is a tale that forces us to confront the uncomfortable truth that sometimes the most horrific monsters are not creatures of fantasy, but real people lurking in plain sight. The horror of Gacy's crimes lies not only in the brutal acts themselves, but in the profound betrayal of the social bonds that make community possible. When a man who is presumed to be a neighbor, a friend, a pillar of society, turns out to be a harbinger of death, it shakes the very foundations of our trust. The legacy of his deception, the grim fate of his 33 victims, and the lasting impact on an entire community continue to serve as a somber warning to future generations. As we listen to this narrative, we are reminded of the intricate interplay between the facade we present to the world and the hidden depths that can lie beneath. John Wayne Gacy's life is a testament to the darkness that can reside in the most unassuming places, a darkness that, if left unchecked, can fester into something truly monstrous. It calls into question our ability to truly know the people around us, urging a measure of vigilance even in familiar surroundings. And while Gacy's name may evoke immediate revulsion, His case also compels us to consider the social and psychological forces that contribute to such aberrant behavior, so that we might better protect our communities in the future. For those who venture into discussions of true crime and the human psyche, the story of Gacy remains both a source of academic inquiry and a visceral reminder of the capacity for cruelty that can lurk behind a smiling face. As you reflect on this tale, remember that the true horror is not just in the acts committed, but in the betrayal of trust and the shattering of the social bonds that hold us together. In our pursuit of understanding, we must never forget the voices of those who were silenced, nor the responsibility we share in safeguarding the light of community against the creeping shadows of hidden evil.